when he saw that the city was given over to idols. That means he really got stirred up, got angry, because they all worshiped idols. And anytime I read that, I wonder what Paul would think if he visited our town and drove around, and on every corner there was what we call a church house. And they all got different names on them, and everybody calling herself different things. You suppose his spirit might be provoked when he saw all that? Well, we've come to see it as just an everyday thing. Verse 17 says, he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentile worshippers, and in the marketplace daily with those who happened to be there. And that's concerning these idols. And verse 18 says, there were certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers that encountered him. Now the Epicureans were the people that believed in pursuit of pleasure, that the whole meaning of life was to pursue your pleasures. And sometimes we say, he lives life to the fullest. We've kind of still got some of that philosophy today. The Stoics were those that sought to avoid any type of joy or any type of grief. So you know, just imagine how miserable they were. And so they confront Paul. And some said, what does this babbler want to say? And this morning we looked up that word babbler there, and it's really means something real derogatory. Babbler doesn't lead us to that now, but they really were criticizing him. And what's he trying to say? Others said he seems to be a proclaimer of foreign gods, because he preached them Jesus and the resurrection. So that tells us what he was doing in the synagogue and in the marketplace every day. He was teaching and preaching Jesus and the resurrection to these people that didn't know about it. So they took him to the Areopagus and said, may we know this new doctrine of which you speak. Now the Areopagus is literally Mars Hill. And it's the place where, that's another place referred to as the council sometimes. It's where all the big shots went. All the men, the leaders of the city. And they all gathered there and made decisions. So they took him in front of all the big shots and said, okay, here's, you tell us what you're trying to say. What are you talking about? Explain to us this Jesus. For you are bringing some strange things to our ears. Therefore we want to know what these things mean. For all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else. I want you to notice people hadn't changed too much. In nothing else but either trying to tell or hear something new. That's all their education consisted of, was hearing new things and then believing whatever fit their philosophy. Whatever the philosophy was, if they found something that fit it, they adopted it. If not, they threw it out. On another occasion, earlier than this, we find Jesus confronted by some Pharisees. This is in Matthew chapter 15. You're probably familiar with verse 7 through 9. And these were religious people too. And he said, this people honors me with their lips. He said, Isaiah said this, and he's talking about you, and he could be talking about some people today too. This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrine the precepts of men. And so what these people were still looking for in Athens was more precepts of men. And that's what they were living their life by, was precepts of men. And it said, Jesus said this is in vain. And all precepts of men lead to vain religion. And all the denominations you see today are the result of precepts of men, adding to God's word or leaving out part of God's word. This is in vain. In 1 John 4 and verse 1, it says, beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Now, today, you can know whether I'm speaking God's word or not, simply by opening that book and seeing whether what I say is in the book or not. And if it's not, you don't have to agree with it. You can ask Jim Freeman, I've got opinions about everything. He does too. Mine are better than his. If they weren't, I'd use his opinions. But when it comes to God's word, we're not liberty to do that, are we? We look at the book and see what's there. My philosophy is not, if it's not in harmony with God's word, then it's time for me to change my philosophy and get in line with the word. Now in verse 22 it says, Paul stands up in the midst of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. I want you to notice there that they were religious, just like the Pharisees that Jesus talked to, but they were wrong in what they believed and the way they worshiped and what they worshiped. And you can be religious, and you can be right, or you can be religious and you can be wrong. And we've already said how to know the difference. I perceive you are very religious, for I was passing through and considering the object of your worship, and I found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you. Paul was opportunistic. He's taking this opportunity of this idol that says unknown God. He said, I'm going to tell you about this God you don't know. And today it's important that all men know God. In 2 Thessalonians 1 and about verse 7 through 9, it says that one day Jesus is going to return with his angels in flaming fire. He's going to take vengeance on those that know not God and obey not the gospel. That they're going to be totally separated from God and tormented forever apart from God. So it's important that we know God. And sometimes we neglect the greatest subject of the Bible, which is God, and focus on other very important subjects. But our goal should be one day to see God, to be in God's presence. In John 14 verse 6, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. Our object is to get to God through Jesus. We preach Jesus Christ and Him crucified as the way to get to God. So we need to understand about God. We're going to look at some of the things that Paul told these Athenians about God this morning. In verse 23 it ends there with Him I proclaim to you, this one God, one true God. In Hebrews 11 verse 6 it says, without faith it's impossible to please Him. For he that comes to God must believe that He is, that He exists, and that He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. So in order to please God, we must first